Ink on His Fingers by Louise A. Vernon. Chapter 5, Surprise Discovery. Hans did not want Ulrich to see him. He hurried down the hall and stood before the prior's closed door. Inside, men's voices rose and fell. The conference must have been going on for a long time and showed no sign of ending. Hans shifted from one foot to the other. Should he wait or should he go to his next class? Decisions, decisions. Why were there always so many? Before he could make up his mind what to do, he heard Reuben's familiar grumble, this time pitched higher than usual. Hans looked around. Reuben was propelling Ulrich ahead by holding on to his ear. "Is the prior in there?" Reuben asked Hans. "Yes, but someone is in there with him." Ulrich grinned, and Hans tried to smile too, but he could not force himself to do more than grimace. Reuben released Ulrich near the door. "I've got to see him at once. This young thief must be dealt with." "I'm not a thief," Ulrich said, quite at ease. Reuben glowered at him. "Why everything happens to me I don't know. As if I didn't have enough to worry about getting up at 3, busy all day long, and now this." He waved a flour-stained hand. Ulrich rubbed his ear. The impish glint in his dark eyes and the way he held himself with watchful readiness aroused Hans's envy. Ulrich looked as if he didn't have a worry in the world. Reuben continued to mourn his personal fate. "My bread's ready to come out of the oven. I can't stay here, and I can't go, not with thieves around." "Why don't you tell him who I am, Hans?" Ulrich suggested. After Hans explained, he saw a half-smile lurk behind Reuben's scowl. "Just a schoolboy prank, eh?" Reuben asked. "He's going to have to talk to the prior about it anyway. Hans, what are you doing here?" "I have to see the prior." Hans could not bear to admit he had to leave school. "Your friend here must see him first." Reuben cast a despairing glance toward the kitchen. "Everybody trusts you, Hans, though boys will be boys, as I know only too well. That bread has to come out of the ovens now, or the prior will put me in one of the penitents' cells down in the cellar. Horrible place, dripping moss." Reuben shuddered. "Hans, see to it that that boy sees the prior. I have to go." He sped back to the kitchen. Hans stiffened. What story would Ulrich have to tell this time? What if he tried to run away? With one spring, he could be on his way to the front entrance and out into the courtyard. Of course, the walls would stop him. Or would they? "Ulrich, how did you get inside the monastery walls?" Ulrich leaned against the wall. "Easy. Overhanging apple tree." "But why did you do it that way?" "Because some peasant boys chased me. I got away, saw the overhanging branch, and swung up on it. I was inside the walls then and didn't know what to do, so I stayed all night in one of the storehouses. The cook found me. I'll explain it all to the prior." Hans felt better. "Explain? That's all I've been doing lately." "Me too." "Ulrich, didn't you find your uncle?" Ulrich straightened up, tense and excited. "Yes, and what a story he told. He's gone to Haarlem to be with some printers there." "Printers?" "Yes, you know those metal-tipped sticks? They're used in a new process for copying books. It's called printing." In his enthusiasm, Ulrich looked taller and more grown up. Johann Gutenberg has already printed a calendar, 4 years ago in 1448. Now he's printing his masterpiece. You'll never guess what it is. "The Bible," Hans said promptly. Ulrich's face fell. "How did you guess?" Hans told all that had happened to him since he last saw Ulrich. Ulrich pranced about in glee. "Then why don't you become an apprentice to Johann Gutenberg too? You said you wanted to copy the Bible, didn't you?" In a burst of insight, Hans saw that God had not withheld the means by which he could copy the Bible, but instead had provided an entirely new way. Even Father's death, so painfully hard to understand, had its place in God's greater plan. The discovery thrilled Hans, but one thing puzzled him. Why didn't your uncle stay in Mainz to help with the Bible? "It all goes back to the morning I came," Ulrich said. "My uncle overheard Herr Fust trying to bribe a peddler into taking that pouch of types to some patron. The peddler refused, threw the pouch down on the counter, and went out. Herr Fust sent my uncle after him, and during that time I came in. The workmen discovered the types gone just as I looked into the workroom. Herr Fust put that pouch into my bundle, but he didn't want anyone to know he had them." "But what was he trying to do?" Hans asked. "I don't know. Anyway, my uncle said he wasn't going to spoil my chances for the apprenticeship, so he went to Haarlem." A shuffle of sandaled feet down the hall made them both turn. "Here comes Brother John," Hans whispered. "I'm going to show him something. You won't run away, will you?" "Of course not." Brother John advanced with silent steps toward the prior's door. Hans took out the 3 parchment sheets from inside his shirt and spread them like a fan. "Brother John, would you look at this writing?" Brother John's round, pleasant face turned a mottled red. "Who gave these to you? Get rid of them at once." Hans stared in bewilderment. Had Brother John lost his senses? "Where shall I take them?" he asked. "Any place. To the kitchen. Tell Reuben to stuff them in his fireplace." Hans slipped past the refectory into the kitchen. Reuben, surrounded by a dozen loaves of bread, slumped over his stool, half asleep. A ladling spoon lay crisscross on the floor in a pool of cooked barley. 2 mice scampered away, their whiskers prickling, in spite of Brother John's urgency. Hans could not resist teasing the cook. "Wake up, Reuben. The prior is coming." What? Oh!" Reuben jumped up, looked wildly around, and pulled a heavy kettle away from the hot bricks. Hans laughed. "I'm fooling, Reuben, but you shouldn't sleep so much." "Up at 3, to bed by 11, Reuben grumbled. "It isn't natural." He stared at Hans. "Where is your friend? Is the prior talking to him?" "Not yet." "But you were supposed to watch him. I trusted you." Reuben sounded aggrieved. "Brother John came along. He wants you to do something for him." Brother John has been doing a penance since day before yesterday. Ever since that banker came to talk to the prior, everyone has been upset. Brother John hasn't eaten a bite since then. Reuben narrowed his eyes in a suspicious look. "Where did you see him?" "By the prior's cell. He's waiting to talk to him." "He'll probably go back to the penitent's cell afterward. He needs some food. I'll fix his tray." Reuben flopped down on a wooden bench by the long work table. "Let's see. Is it bread with salt or bread without salt? I never can remember." Hans listened to the familiar grumbling, lost in his own uneasy thoughts. Why had Brother John demanded the burning of the 3 sheets of parchment? They did not belong to the monastery. What had possessed Brother John to give such a command? He determined not to turn the sheets over to Reuben to be burned. Instead, he put them inside his shirt once more. What was the favor Brother John wanted? Reuben stirred a kettle of barley. "I'll be back later, Reuben," Hans answered. On his way back to tell Ulrich, Hans spied an open door down the hall. The scriptorium, no less. Unlocked? Unheard of. Here was his chance to examine Brother John's illuminated Bible. Hans's heart lurched with excitement and dread at the temptation. If he were caught, he would have to confess. A mea culpa in front of his classmates. And on top of that, a heavy penance. But this was his last day. Why not take a chance? He could learn something, and no one was around. Hans beckoned Ulrich and showed him the room. It's the scriptorium. Brother John's Bible is in there. Ulrich's eyes widened, but come on, it's our only chance to see it. Then Hans hesitated. Enter the forbidden room? But after all, he would be copying the Bible himself someday in printing. He could compare the two ways and find out for himself the difference between printing and writing. Brother John had never let the boys within breathing distance of the precious manuscript. To touch it was unthinkable for a schoolboy. Very well, he would not touch it, but this might be the only chance they would have, ever. The boys tiptoed inside the scriptorium. The sloped writing desks and low shelves with bound books on their sides looked different, somehow. Pale rays of sunshine filtered through the shuttered window, like fingers pointing out guilt. Where is it? Ulrich asked. Hans tiptoed to a waist-high shelf at the far end of the room. The thick Bible lay on its side, longer than fingertip to elbow. Are you going to open it? Ulrich whispered. Hans hesitated. They would have to open it after all. How else could they see what the writing was like? The Bible, when open, made both boys gasp. The black script, in 2 columns, was surrounded at the margins with leafy designs colored in soft greens, blues, and reds, edged in gold. 3 unbound sheets had been tucked into the Bible. They looked familiar to Hans, and as he started to examine them, he heard the shuffle of feet out in the hall. He nudged Ulrich in warning. The sheets fluttered to the floor. Hans grabbed them and, to his horror, saw that he had left a smudge on the parchment from his thumb, still ink-stained from his printing experiments at Herr Mueller's the day before. Dizzy with guilt, Hans remembered his promise to himself not to touch the pages. Why had he yielded to the temptation to enter the scriptorium? Then he realized no one had come into the room after all. He and Ulrich would not be discovered. With trembling fingers, he picked up the sheets of parchment. They were the same as the 3 sheets he had brought to show Brother John. Someone copied this page 3 times, Ulrich exclaimed. Is that the way they do it here? For answer, Hans brought out the 3 sheets he had brought from home and explained how he had found them in his father's box. Ulrich grasped the truth. Why, this is printing, he gasped. But it looks just like handwriting. The boys compared the loose pages with the same passage in the bound Bible. The printing was perfect, not a hair's breadth of difference in the 6 copies. Hans thought of his fumbling efforts to stamp metal letters on paper. Whoever had printed these 6 sheets was a master. But of course, wasn't that what the workmen called Johann Gutenberg? Hans lost himself in a daydream. He and Ulrich would be the first apprentices in the great art of printing. We'd better leave, Ulrich whispered. Put the pages back. Hans heard a half-whisper in the hall. He had presence of mind enough to cram the 3 smudged parchment sheets inside his shirt and insert the 3 clean ones into the Bible. Too late. Someone was coming in.